All right, welcome everybody. We are here. We are live and in person. Yay! We did it. Welcome to the
Yay!
show. I know, it's second week, new technology. We got it down. This is awesome. That's awesome. Brenda
We're all
Neckbottle.
kinds of
Check
awesome.
that out. New graphic. New graphic. And over here we've got Susan Lucas, also known as the Evil HR Lady. And you guys can find us up on our social media. You can find us over on our websites. Oh, we have a special visitor today.
This is my coworker Claudia, and she was not supposed to be in this
Oh.
room, but apparently she snuck in.
That's awesome. She's gorgeous.
She's a pretty kitty.
She is.
She's a
She's a
pretty
very.
kitty, but she tends to sexually harass her coworkers.
Oh my gosh, that's
So I
awesome.
don't really know what to do about that.
Yeah, well, that's understandable. That's
There you go.
understandable. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, you do have to model the way.
Supposed to be in this room, but apparently she snuck in. You do.
You have to model the way.
You do need to monitor, and she's not very good at listening to reprimanding. So I don't know. I don't know
Oh
what to
my
do,
gosh.
Brenda. Humans I can fire. What do I do with a cat? No, she's a
They
good
tend to
kitty.
do whatever they want, whenever they want.
That is exactly right. Like, vice presidents, they tend to do whatever they want, whenever they want, and then they're shot sometimes when they land in court. But that's for a different day.
You're so funny. Oh my trip. All right. Well, so we've agreed not to talk about the whole coronavirus wonkiness, weird stuff, because we're tired of it. We don't want to have anything to do with it.
I honestly
over it.
spent all day today. I did a webinar last Friday, and I said I would answer any follow-up questions. I got 90 follow-up questions. So that was a mistake. So I have been spending all day. So I am coroned out.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of them I can consolidate down into one question, but still.
Well, I had that same thing happen. I was like one of the first people to get out and do a webinar in March when all this was, flying around. And one of the companies that I'm contracted with, they were, like, well, it's not within our 30, 40 days of posting. And I'm like, no, you have to get on this like now. And so, and we
Right.
did, and we had 500 people. It was crazy. We had 500 people on that one session. And like you, I had about 80 some odd questions. And then I did another one with the same company when the laws came out, with the Families for Coronavirus Response Act came out. And, it was so weird. It was like that one law, and this is like totally off our topic right now. So we have to, it's like you have one act with two acts embedded into it. It was just really bizarre. And so we had like 475 people. And unfortunately, what was happening was that the moderator kept copying and pasting the same questions over and over and over again. And I didn't catch on to it because she kept posting like 35 new questions over and over again. And I kept rolling through, and I'm like, God, why are these people asking the same question? I can't even say what it is. And it wasn't until like halfway through the second round that I figured out what was happening. And so I had to like manually scroll through everything, and I'm like, hang on guys. And we extended it for like 2 hours. It was really funny. I don't think she realized what she did, and finally she got to some of the fresher questions, the newer questions that hadn't been asked, and I was like, "Oh, hallelujah!" It was just like, "Oops," but that's all right. That's the fun part about
There's always fun with live.
Oh, life is fun.
That's the
Period.
fun part of
So
life.
yeah, exactly.
It is fun, but here's the thing. You can either cry and be embarrassed,
True.
or you can laugh at it.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think this makes a difference. And this does get us to our topic today, about dealing with sensitive people in the workplace. Because you know what? Things happen. And and sometimes embarrassing things happen. Sometimes people say things that they don't mean to. Their mouths go faster than their brain. I may have a problem with that from time to time.
That
As
was
I
a
just told all
maniacal
of you
laugh.
about my sexually harassing cat. The poor thing is not fixed, and her male companion is fixed, and she does not understand why he is not into her. Um, she's an indoor cat. Nobody worry. I don't want any hate mail saying why are you not fixing your cat. She's a total indoor cat, and she will get fixed. She wasn't old enough to get fixed until quarantine started, and now there's a waiting list at the vet. So anyway, random. But we have different things
Yeah, it was.
happen. Sorry. And how we respond to them and how other people respond to them is something that every HR person and every manager and actually every human needs to know how to deal with.
Absolutely. And there's also people who are more sensitive than others. And that's hard.
There are people that work with this. It can be really, really hard when you have somebody that is super sensitive, and it can also be difficult to not just say to the person, just suck it up. um, it doesn't
I know,
help.
because that's what everybody
It,
wants to say deep down.
right, right. And I remember as a child, I was a big crier as a child, and I would cry at everything. And my dad used to say, "Stop crying." And I thought that was cruel until I became a parent and an HR manager, and I wanted to say, "Stop crying." There's plenty of things that you should cry over. If I've just told you that your position has been eliminated and today is your last day, please go ahead and cry. That's all right. That is that is perfectly okay. Um, if I tell you this is the third time this week you've clocked in late, that's not a crying thing.
I know.
So,
You just triggered a memory of mine. So years ago, when I was working in big box retail, I was a operations manager, and I wasn't in a bona fide HR position, but they were using my HR background and skills for some special. We had one I brought in because it was a lot of constructive conversation with her about something she was out of alignment, and she just started to cry, and I wasn't the one holding the conversation. I was the witness in this. And so this store manager didn't I mean he's a nice guy, but he didn't have much of a constitution, and so he was starting to feel uncomfortable because then the boohoo tears were coming out and the book is on, and then she's like, I have to go outside, and of course I set the room up so they could leave it in on a problem. I don't want to block anybody in, but um she went outside, had a cigarette, and I said, go
no, no,
ahead,
no.
take a break, come back, and we're going to finish this conversation. And some of the subject matter that she was talking about was pretty significant, was pretty serious. And so she they went back to her workstation, watching her on the video camera going by, and I'm like, just stay here. I just about her and I said, back there laughed. And I said, yeah, we're not done. And brought her back on up and she tried, and I sat her down and I said, look, here's the deal. I know that you got stuff going on in your life, but I'm going to tell you right now that if you do another like you just did, go out and have a cigarette and then return back to your workstation, that's not going to fly. Face this, because what we're talking about is pretty minuscule compared to everything that you're going through. So you can fix this. Now, tell us how we can help support you. You know? And so I had to be the hard nose, you know. I was.
Well,
I was
sometimes
always
you do
they
need to
always
be
used
the
me.
hard nose.
Yeah, I mean, I can be the hard nose. I can
That's what
be
it takes,
the
man.
sensitive. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, we're not doing this. So, but it,
Well, and I noticed that you said she had a lot going on in her life otherwise, and sometimes your life spills into your work. Um, and this is not work related, but there was a time when I needed to go talk to the school nurse about my daughter, and I was sick. I was talking to the nurse. I was terribly sick, and I went to say something quite neutral to her, and I just started crying. And it had nothing to do with the poor girl nurse was like, "Oh, Mrs. Lucas, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm fine. I just feel terrible." But there's certainly teachers love me. Um, there are certainly times when lots of things going on in people's lives can make it difficult. It can make you far more
yeah,
sensitive to things. You laughing at me crying for the school
yeah,
nurse? She hugged me.
exactly.
I was
You
like,
know, in my
"You're not
example,
a six."
yeah, and you know, in all fairness, in my example, that was an example of somebody, you know, and you know, because we had, you know, we were talking to her about her attendance, and we
Oh yeah.
knew from other employees that she was partying it up, and you know, she was starting to come in late, and it's like, yeah, she does have other things going on in her life, but you know, the things that were going on in her life weren't they weren't out of control. It was just, you know, using that excuse, and that is something that a lot of leaders have to run into, especially when you're, you know, they deal with when it comes to frontline employees, is that, you know, not everybody is willing to stand up and take accountability. They like to use excuses, and it is the biggest time suck for anybody, and it's annoying and it's hard. And as much as, you know, we feel that we need to rise above things like that, it's a reality.
It is a reality, and sometimes people are using them as excuses, and they know they're using it as an excuse.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are using it as an excuse, and they don't realize.
Yeah, this one was using it as an excuse and she knew exactly what she was doing, you know, and it is what it is. I
The
think I
coming in
lost you.
late is something that's really
There you
easy
are.
to. Did I disappear? um,
You your salt for a second there.
ooh, like Lot's wife. There you go.
You who?
Lot's wife from the book of Genesis. You need to pay
Ah,
attention in Sunday school, man. Um, I'd forgot what I was saying. Oh, they're using the excuse, and the coming in late is something that's easy because that's something that's cut and dried, right? I mean, in some companies it doesn't matter, but in a lot of positions it matters when you show up. You know, like retail, it really matters when you get there. And people will say, you know, well, you're picking on me because I am the wrong race, I'm the wrong gender, I'm a single mom, I'm disabled, or whatever. And some of them are using it as an excuse, and they know it's
hmm,
that way. And others truly feel like their coworkers are getting away with it, and you're only picking on them.
right.
And it can become very difficult to educate you, because you can say it straight out. No, this is the rule for everyone. And they still won't necessarily believe that you're not picking on them. That can be tough.
Right. It's one of the situations to where, they have it so embedded into their mind, and to the point where you have to question whether or not something that they can overcome. If this is something that therefore becomes constantly toxic, it could be a toxic element in the relationship between supervisor and subordinate. And, those aren't easy things to deal with. And there's no one magical answer. You just have to continue to
No,
just push through it all the time.
you do. And there needs to be some discussion on what is appropriate to be upset about and what
Mm-hmm.
is not.
Yeah.
And we've already said that sometimes I speak without thinking, and sometimes I engage with strangers on the internet when I know it's going to turn around and bite me. Oh,
You
yeah.
might want to be
So,
clear there's no tomfoolery in that.
yeah. So
I know what you're
the
talking
other day, I know we talked about this in advance. So the other day, I was on Facebook, and I'm part of several different groups, and I'm not going to identify this group. It's a lovely group. I just want to say it's a lovely group for professional women. And somebody posted a little picture that says, to the women who are labeled, and then it has a list. It says, aggressive, keep being assertive, difficult, keep telling the truth, um, so on and so forth. One of them was bossy, keep on leading. This is a hot button issue for me because bossy is not leadership, in
about.
my humble opinion. Um, Bossy is very, very different, actually, from leadership. And so I responded that bossy is not leadership. And I linked an article that I wrote many years ago about this when Sheryl Sandberg had the big thing going out saying, I hope that um, all little girls who are told that they're bossy are really told that they're leaders. And um, so I said, bossy, shut up and do it my way. I know best, and leadership is the opposite. And quite a few people were very offended at what I
Mm-hmm.
said. And one of them gave an example of just how wrong I was um, in saying that. And her example was that she had sent a message to a peer, and peer is the word that she used, and she needed something. I'll read what she said. It says, I had a peer who was holding back the rest of the team because he wasn't focused on a specific action he needed to execute. I sent a message along the lines of, if you could shift your focus to blank, it would unblock several of us. He replied with, sure thing, Mrs. Bossy. So there's a couple of things going on here, and we're talking about sensitive people. I would argue that both people on this exchange were being sensitive, and she was being a little bit bossy. And the reason why I say she's a little bit bossy is because they were peers. She wasn't this person's manager.
Right.
And she said, if you could shift your focus to, what she needed, and that seems like a pretty neutral statement, but telling someone who you don't manage to shift their focus is really out of line.
Right.
And I responded that what she should have said is, we need this um, to go forward. Can you let me know when it'll be done? Um, and then give the person the chance to respond, I can't because I've got all these other things. And then you can suggest, could you ask your boss to prioritize, or you go to your boss and say, can you reprioritize everything? But by her telling him, reprioritize to make my stuff first, that's a little bit bossy. And his response of, sure thing, Mrs. Bossy, is kind of rude. And she was really offended by it. The thing is if somebody said that to me, I would laugh.
Yeah.
Because I am kind of bossy.
Well, I would, for me, I would take a step back and go, oh, did I cross a line? Part of me would find it funny later on, but my normal reaction when stuff like that happens is, did I cross a line? And, part of that is like in my world is I'm dyslexic. So I interpret the world very differently. And I'm quite often not interpreting it immediately correctly. So when somebody does something like that, it's either an indicator that I didn't interpret what was going on properly. And that's 9 times out of the 10 what it is. And I've, kind of stepped out of what somebody believes are the bounds, and I just need to just make sure that I clean it up with somebody. But then, there are times where somebody says something that's snarky and it's just like, where did that come from? And, it could be that just how I conveyed it, or, maybe the person was just not in a good spot. But for me, I've always like owned it 100% until I've been able to get to the bottom of it, which there are times where that's not good, for your own individual self-efficacy. I mean, you do have to take a look at something and determine whether or not you're going to hardline where you are with it. But more often than not, it's just I've missed the cue.
Well, and I think that's a really good point, and there's a delicate balance there because
Yeah.
you don't want to be a complete doormat.
No, and I was for a long time.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you do need to sit down and evaluate. Now, if
Right.
this woman had been this person's boss and he had responded that way, his response was inappropriate. Let me be clear, his response was inappropriate unless they had that kind of joking relationship,
Right.
which they clearly did not because she was upset about it. But if she had been his boss and she said, I want you to shift this focus, and he responds, sure, Mrs. Bossy Pants, that's like a serious issue because that is her job. She is the boss.
Right.
And it's my job as your manager to tell you, I want you to focus on this and have this be your priority. As your peer, I don't have that authority to say you need to shift what you're doing. And most likely, I don't know what other things you're working on.
Yeah, and it's a matter of putting whatever the situation is into context. I mean, and these are the things that we have to look at when somebody presents a question or a challenge or a complaint across our desk. Is that one is what's the relationship between these two individuals? Are they peers or are they supervisor subordinate? What is their how casual are they in their working relationship? Could it have been that somebody said something and it was meant to be in jest and it wasn't taken that way? Did somebody really step out of the lines and, overcross their boundary, or message could have been delivered differently or better? Because sometimes, and as well as I do, email is the best and worst medium of communication out there. It's great because you can send something out, you can track it, you can involve multiple people, but then you see what happens when confusion arises, or somebody is writing it in an emotional state, and now all of a sudden it just goes completely sideways. Everybody's having a bitch arguing fest through email, and nobody's picking up the phone to say, hey, listen, I don't think I was trying to say, or I didn't convey it well. Do you have a minute? Let's talk about this on the phone. And then that way you get all of the modes, all the communication between two people, voice inflection, tone, volume, intention. You don't get that in writing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as someone that loves email and messaging with my whole heart, um, I love it so much. Um, it's sometimes very important to pick up that phone,
Yeah.
um, and have that face to face conversation. And not face to face over the phone, but face to face is even better, because you can really read body language that way.
Yep.
And that's something. Living here in Switzerland, I speak pretty good German for an expat, which other expats will understand what I'm saying. Like, I speak better than most expats, but I'm not fluent. And face to face, I can have an hour-long conversation with someone in German, no problem. Over the phone, I find it incredibly difficult
Really?
because
Why is that?
so much of what we say to one another is nonverbal. And when you're speaking on the phone, you get tone, right? But you
Yep.
don't see the hand movements and the this and the that and the way they're tilting their head. And all of these things, it makes it so much easier because if somebody uses a word that I don't know, but I can see how their body language is and I know the general topic of conversation, I can then put it all together and understand what they meant, even though I may not be able to translate it directly.
Right.
Over the phone, that's much more difficult. And over email, it's even harder.
Yes.
And, um, and that's, when we're talking multiple languages here, even if we're all native English speakers, sometimes things via email, just like with this, okay, Mrs. Bossy Pants, said to her face, if he said it with a big smile and, immediately got to work, she might not have been bothered by it, because she could tell he was clearly joking. Over email, maybe not so much. And I think I love working at home. I love that more companies are doing that, even though they're forced to do it now, but that more people are doing that. But if you don't actually know your coworkers, then that makes all the messaging and emailing even more difficult when we're talking
Yeah.
about sensitive people.
Yeah. I've got I've got a situation that I've been working through for a little while now. And it's this particular situation is not I'm not in a situation where I can actually take the person. I have somebody who's really incredibly sensitive. I mean, really sensitive. And it's a younger guy. And everything that happens, like he interprets what everybody is doing, and he's always offended by stuff, like always. And he seems to think that everything that one or two people say is with him. Now, I'll be honest with you, I was very much the same way when I was younger until I figured out a couple of things about, stuff in my life. But everything that comes across his way is some intentional, jab or some intentional way to get to him for in some manner or another. And having that objective viewpoint that I do, I don't see it, but I see him and how he responds. It's I've gotten to the point where I just do a lot of listening more so than anything else at this point. There's really not much more I can do unless I actually hear that somebody has committed a deliberate offense towards this individual, because it's just everything is so out of whack. And with the effort that I'm leading involving this, and I get this, well, I'm just going to leave. And I'm thinking, at some point, I don't want the person to leave because I think they have a lot to add to the team. But at the same time, if you don't feel like you fit, and if you don't feel like you're being respected and nobody can tell you otherwise, I think maybe leaving and go find another project or another work group or something like that is actually probably the best move to make, because I can't fix this.
Right, Right. And when it's internal, your
Yeah.
boss can't fix it, your HR person
No.
can't fix it. A good therapist can help you fix it, but you have to
Mhm.
fix it.
Yeah.
As I said, a good therapist can help guide you through, and that's where you need to turn. And I'm a huge fan of employee assistance programs because they can often get you started on those things, but there's still somewhat of a stigma against getting therapy.
Well,
And
it still is. We can't tell somebody you're being oversensitive, you need therapy.
yeah,
You
yeah,
might want to.
that doesn't go over well.
No,
We
it
may
does
want to.
not. That could just be the person's individual makeup and how they perceive the world. And, they have to be the one to recognize if they have insecurities that are leading them down that path. We can't sit there and tell somebody that they're insecure and you need counseling. That's just not good.
It's not going to go far. I totally agree. But the thing is that that's what needs to happen because the person needs to take that ownership themselves.
Yeah.
And your story reminded me of a situation this um, years and years and years ago when I was a child. Um, at church, there was the crabbiest old lady, and she was so crabby. And my mother is the nicest person on the planet. So she decided that she was going to be nice to Verna and make friends with her. So this is the goal of my mother, who is saintly as compared to me, who is not saintly. But my mother is saintly. So she sits down next to Verna, and the person conducting says, "We're going to sing hymn number 22 or something." And so my mom picks up the hymn book, offers half of it to Verna, and Verna says, "No, I've memorized all the hymns." And my mother says, "That's amazing." And
I'll
she said, true
742 months.
story. That's right. She said, "Well, I had to. Every time we sang, I always got the heavy side of the hymn book." Now, I made Brenda burst the gasket. When you think about that, how incredibly ridiculous that is. The amount of effort that the music leader would have to go to. Okay, where's Verna sitting? Is the person on her right or on her left going to want to share the hymn book with her? It's looking like the person on the left, so let's go for this hymn. I mean, that's just not happening.
Quick, change the numbers. Verna's sitting on the left.
That's right. We
42.
got to change the number. That's right. Um,
That is so funny.
she spent her whole life viewing things that way.
Yeah.
And we can do that in a much lesser thing. She's, of course, the most extreme person I've ever met on that. But there are plenty of things, we all hear the horror stories of the boss says, "Oh, that's a nice dress," and then the woman sues for sexual harassment. Um, and someone like me was like, I would say, "Gosh, thanks. It has pockets," because that's what I would say if someone complimented my dress. Um, but people come with this in with different viewpoints and different life experiences. If that woman that's like, "Now I'm going to sue for sexual harassment," and we all say, "Oh my gosh, she just complimented your dress." If we understand that she just changed jobs because she was horribly sexually harassed in her last job and was fired unjustly or whatever. She had this horrible, horrible experience. And she's finally here at this new company and she's so happy. And the first thing a man says to her is, "Your dress looks nice." She's on edge. She's on
Yep.
edge. Um, and again, we need that therapy that we can't push. But it becomes much more understandable if you have the
Yep.
backstory.
Yeah.
And then it's also possible for the boss to actually be sleep. Hey, Brenda, that's a nice dress, Like that way that fits. Nice dress, Brenda.
Yeah. Find out exactly what he's made out of real quick. But there's I had a boss guy. Oh my gosh. We had dinner. We had actually had lunch a little while ago. He's one of my favorite mentors of all time. And I actually included him in one of my books. It's called Holy Cow, I Have to Talk to My Boss. And it really was, the focus of the book is to help people understand that, there are things that are constantly on your boss's mind. There's 4 rules to engaging conversation with your boss. And shameless plug, it's available on Amazon.com. Anyway, I had a total shameless plug on that one. But Tom was really great.
That's what we do.
I know, right? Tom was really great at helping people see like their behaviors. And sometimes they were kind of hard lessons. And one of the best lessons I ever heard and saw. So typically when somebody rises through rank, right? They're excited. We've all done it. Everybody can talk about it. Sometimes we get a little bit of an ego. Now that we're in a position, we know that we can wield a little bit more influence or dictate the direction of something. And that's exactly what was happening in this situation. And so I was asked to attend the weekly managers meeting, which I was not normally a part of. And I had to talk about something that was significant. And Tom wanted me to come up and deliver the information. And I told him I'd be happy to do so. And so we went up, and it was the most brilliant thing I ever saw. We had 3 young managers just get promoted. And they were sitting around before the meeting started talking smack about how this process sucks and that process sucks and this process is terrible and right. And they're all just standing around complaining. And one of them has a tendency, she was a little bit more sensitive than the others. And her way of dealing with, her sensitivity was to become, a barking dog at you and, throw it right back in your face. And so we start, and I'm just, and everybody except these 3 were just going off and complaining about this one thing. And it was the girl who took it to the next level. And then she started throwing other people's names in. And I'm watching my boss, and I'm like waiting to see what he's going to do, because this man literally exhales genius sometimes. And a lot of people who worked with him just wish they could have thought of what he said and said it for themselves. So I am one to pay attention to the environment. I am a master at observation. And so I just kind of kept watching what these senior managers were doing, and they're just sitting there and had this look on their face like, it's coming. I can see it. It's coming. Hang on. It's going to happen. And I got done complaining about how horrible something was. Tom looked at her. He says, "Well, congratulations. You just volunteered to fix it." It was brilliant. It was brilliant. But it drew that line in that sand without, and he's smiling the whole way, and everybody's kind of laughing because we all saw it coming, but we didn't know what he was going to do, right? And so what it did is it just drew that line in the sand that it's like, look, there's sensitive, and then there's like, you're a leader now. You're a manager, and you're in a leadership position. If you don't like something, you have to communicate it, help figure out the solution for it, and then move it to a resolution. And so instead of telling her that, he gave her the experience. And the second he said, "Congratulations, you just volunteered to fix it," she goes, like right in the middle of the meeting. It was so great. She never did it again. She never griped like that in front of him again. She would gripe to everybody else. And finally, one time she came into my office and she's like, "This is terrible." And she started, and I said, "Do you want to get volunteered to fix it?" She goes, "No." I was like, okay, then just like, either accept whatever this is because it's way beyond us, or volunteer to fix it. Whatever. I don't have time for this. I have this stuff I have to do. Go do it, right? And at the time I wasn't in a position of, management or anything like that. I was an HR sprout. I was an influencer. I was, it was just awesome. It was great. But, she was that sensitive person, and she was that personality where everything just revolved around her.
Sure, sure. And there's something with her in everything. Instead of a lot of stuff just is the way it is. Um,
Right.
and some of that is because no one ever bothered to change it, and change is possible, but it's not directed towards you.
No.
It's just this is our process. This is what we have done for 40 years. And I think that's a really good lesson and a brilliant way of handling it, because instead of saying, Jane, you're being so whiny, you need to, stop your whining, just casual response. Everybody gets the message
Yeah.
that
It was
if,
brilliant.
if I'm going to whine, this is, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good principle. When we complain about stuff, um, we have to ask ourselves, is this within my sphere of control?
Yeah.
And if it is, and I don't like it, then I should work to change it. And if it's not, um, then I need to let it go, or I
Yeah.
need to remove myself from the situation.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to be able to, ask somebody the question. So if you see somebody who's being, I want to bring some, tips and tricks into this, but when you see somebody who's being overly sensitive, or, hypersensitive to something, or what you perceive could be hypersensitive to something, there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, so what do you recommend? How do you recommend moving forward on this? And I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing that. Because if you don't do it, then you're going to wind up losing some serious control of the situation. And it's just going to get a little out of whack. So at some point in time, if you have somebody that is constantly coming to you with nothing but a complaint, and there's constantly sounding like a complaint, then not in an effort to shut them up, but in an effort to move something. Because as when people constantly complain about something, you're not moving the needle. All you're just doing is in this vicious cycle, right? It's like, so what's the solution that you're proposing? And if they
Right.
don't have one, then they're just there to gripe and complain, and then you have to redirect and get them refocused. But if they're presenting a solution, listen to everything that they have to say. And if it's not something that's doable, then at least acknowledge that you've heard what they've offered. You're going to keep that in mind, because it may be something that's bigger than the both of you. And that,
Right.
when the time is right, you're going to present this to the right people and say, hey, listen, what about this? And you might wind up getting a lot more out of that, and some of that sensitivity could diminish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the question of what do you think needs to be done? Because sometimes people don't want to do anything. They
Yeah.
just want to complain. And
Yes.
sometimes that's okay. It's okay. You want to make sure you're complaining to the right person,
Yes.
um, and not the wrong person. And if you just want to complain, I recommend your best friend who does not work with you, or your spouse who does not work with you, because they can listen and sympathize and tell you how brilliant and wonderful you are, and then you can go on with life.
Right.
But if you come to your HR person complaining about a coworker, and the question comes up, well, what do you want me to do? And frequently when I ask that question, the response I get is nothing. I'm just frustrated, and I just wanted someone to be aware. Um, okay, now I'm aware. And if it's, John chews too loudly. Okay, now I know. John chews too loudly. Nothing we want to do about that. But if you come to me and say, John is sexually harassing me, I've got to act now.
Yeah, you're required by law.
I'm required by law to act now.
Right.
So if you really don't want that to be investigated and handled, keep your complaints out of HR. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't report sexual harassment. You should, but I
Yes.
also understand it's not a perfect world where you can report it, it'll be resolved, and we all, go off to Oz happily ever after.
Right.
Um, it's very complicated.
It
It can be
is.
very complicated.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the thing is, like, people forget that when people come with a situation, they're seeking one of two things. They're seeking a magic resolution that may or may never appear. And I don't mean to sound snarky about it, but that's the nature of it. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, they just they're looking for just path of least resistance to resolving a situation as possible. And when you start, if you're listening to this and you're an HR pro, if you're a leader and you start, taking them down that road of, okay, that's great, what do you recommend we do? More than likely you're going to step back because they don't want to engage in the conflict, because conflict isn't
Right.
fun. And that's where you have the ability to really use your skills to be able to help usher them to a better resolution. It's like, okay, so if we're not willing to go down that, if you're not willing to go down that road, then what road are you willing to go down? And it's going to be one of two things. Either accept the situation, especially if it's not a bad situation. I mean, if you're talking about somebody with like a hostile work environment or something like that, you got to let them know that, look, I have to move forward. You brought this to me. It's going to be uncomfortable. You do have options and resources and educate them. But if it's not a situation that is that egregious, and it's a situation to where it's just somebody venting and, just first world problems, aggravations, uh, somebody doesn't like somebody else's perfume, just they don't like it, it's not impacting or giving a headache, and it just annoys the heck out of them.
Right.
Then more than likely they're not going to want to rock the boat. But you got to give them that opportunity to say, hey, listen, this now's the time to address it. If you don't address it, you're going to miss the ship's got to sail at some point. So how do you want to deal with this? And then you just keep putting it back on them, because it's not your problem. It's not always your problem to solve. And that's the thing with sensitive people. It's not always your problem to solve.
Right. And HR isn't the playground monitor,
No.
as much as we like our whistles.
Right.
But and a lot of the conflicts between employees is playground stuff. It's not sexual harassment. It's not racial discrimination. It's not age discrimination. It's just two people that don't get along. And it's okay. You don't have to love everybody. That's the other thing. You don't have to be friends with your coworkers.
Right.
And one of the things I am a huge, huge fan of Mythbusters. Just a brilliant show, and I wish it went on forever. And there's lots of explosions, which are fun. And the two stars, they're not friends. And they'll talk openly about it. They don't go to lunch together. They don't hang out as families. They respect each other. They think each other is brilliant, but they're not friends. And they worked together for years, and they made a brilliant television show. And you can do that. You don't have to be friends with all your coworkers. You can
No.
have different political opinions. You can have different tastes in music. You can have different ideas of what's fun to do on the weekend. You can be anything and just respect each other. And it doesn't have to be this friend thing. And sometimes people not only want people to respect their opinion, but they want them to think the same way they do. And they're offended if you're not?
So I worked for a company a while ago, and it was one of the situations where the people that worked there knew me before I worked there, and they were excited about the possibility of having me come in. They're like, "Oh my God, she's the best. She can figure things out." Blah blah blah. So I had all this praise and accolade. But then when I got in, I got to see some people's real true colors, and this one woman just was tyrant all the time, and she got worse over time. No
Oh
matter
no.
how well you treated her, yeah, she just got really worse. And so she growled at me one day about, you just take offense to everything. And, and I was at that point where I wasn't getting a lot of, I had to battle a lot at that time. And, she was one of the greatest, how do I put it, cheerleaders for my coming aboard. And so then to have her turn around in a time when I really, because you're even an HR person of one, you get no support. It's as simple as that. And that was the
Right.
situation that I was facing. It's just, it's like, how do you deal with your own mental fortitude when it feels like the only thing that you're constantly doing is to fight to get something done. And it's all, a lot of it was silliness, and it wasn't anything like of any major coincidence, but it was just everything. Every corner I turned, I had to fight for a while, and that wasn't fun at all. And that happens in this job, but and finally, it's just like she just got all up in my face about it while we were in my office one day, and I fired right back at her, and I said, "Here's the deal: you keep complaining about something that you have every ability to fix, and you're not doing it. So here's why we're sitting here talking, is because policy is something that's written by multiple people, and that's what we have to do in order to make the environment better. So that way you can stop bitching at me." It just rawr, went right back at her again. And she realized what she was doing, and she was nice after that, but she was just always, assuming that I was getting constantly offended. And it's just like, girlfriend, you have no idea what is going on in my world. And, to have to fight every single day for 4 or 5 months is not fun.
And it's not. It's not a pleasant environment. It's
No,
not.
no, it's not.
And there are
But
things that are worth fighting for
yeah,
every day, but most of it is not. And within the business world, if you are going to work and fighting with your coworkers or your boss every day, which is different than like, I'm here to cure cancer and I'm fighting against cancer every day. That's a different story. But if you're
right.
in this constant conflict, it's time to move on. And
Yeah.
some people, I
And
swear
that's
they don't know
eventually,
this. It's okay to quit. It's okay to find a new job.
yeah. And that's ultimately what I did. I mean, it was just, the company was excited about me being visible and being available to employees, which is very much a part of who I am. When I was on property, I made the rounds and I talked to everybody and I checked in, and I'm accustomed to doing that for many years. That's a good thing. That's a good practice. But at the same time, the same managers that think it's great that I'm on board, they don't like the fact that I'm around because they're fearful that I'm going to learn something that they're doing that they shouldn't. And it's just like, well, you can't have it both ways, you know? So it's
Right,
like,
right.
right. So, and that was that kind of thing. It was that, I don't know there's gotta be sort of euphemism for it, or something like that, but well, I wouldn't call it a double-edged sword, but it definitely was. What wasn't good for the goose wasn't good for the gander, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? It was just, they wanted to everything. Oh, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And you can't have me around to be available when you want to ask me who the fact that I'm around so that I can see because I'm not the one that's running back and telling everybody everything. And if you got some conscious issue going on, then you got to deal with that yourself. I don't know what to tell you. If you see me doing something that you don't think you should be doing and you're doing it, and you think that I'm going to say something, I'm just going to keep speaking in code because I'm not really quite sure how to get to the end of that sentence, but can it? But and not to sound, because we only have a few more minutes left, but and not to sound snarky or harsh or something like that, but these are real things that are these examples that we're giving are when it boils down to getting through it is just having the right kinds of context, and just know that when you're doing it, you may not always come up with an answer, or they may not always be resolved, and more than likely it's going to continue on for some period of time with the hopes that it'll diminish. But that's just the nature of dealing with sensitive people. And if you get it in your head before you start going down that path that I'm dealing with a sensitive individual, it's just going to take a little. You can also determine when to deal with those people. So then that way your time is not being ruled by somebody that's where that time suck thing comes in, right? It's like, God, this person is texting me again. It's like, I just don't have the brain space for it. You don't have to answer right away unless it's an urgent situation. You can
I
make
think
those kinds of determinations.
that is such an important lesson to learn.
Yeah.
And I had someone complaining to me that they were getting text at all hours and how rude. And I was like, then turn it off. Turn off your phone. Have you asked your boss if you're
Yeah.
required to respond? And the answer is no, I haven't asked.
Right.
Okay, well, ask. And she did, and the response was no, you don't have to respond until the next day. Oh, okay. Instead,
Right.
of wishing that it would stop, and there was a simple solution, which is put the boss on mute until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And the boss is
Yeah.
okay with that. Because different
Yep.
people, I mean, some bosses are not. That's why you gotta ask. You gotta ask.
Right.
Um, and otherwise, it can be really tough.
It can. It can. And you know what? It just so happens that we have places that people can go. You guys have been seeing all of the flash ups of how you guys can reach up to us. You've seen our website, so you can find us at evilhrlady.org. That's where you find Suzanne. You'll find me at bestpractices.org. And then, our social platforms as well. Also do have two groups that you guys can join, and these are both on Facebook. You can join the Evil HR Lady Facebook group, where I'm part of that group, and I see what they talk about. And now, you know what? I'm not going to tell them. Why don't you tell them a little bit about your group? I'll tell them about my group.
Well, it's an awesome group. It's mostly HR professionals, but it's a little bit of everybody. There's a lot of people on there that don't have anything to do with HR, but everybody has a boss and everybody has coworkers. And we talk about HR things. You can ask a question, people will jump in. You can ask a resume question, people will jump in. And you can share an interesting article that you've found or one that you've written. Anything like that, anything career related, anything HR related, we talk about it. And one of the things that I love is that everybody is nice and they'll be very, very helpful. Whatever you're doing, they'll be helpful.
That's awesome. And then the other group that you can join too is the Next Gen and Women HR Facebook. What we do is we actually work with individuals to help. I work with them to help get them up to pace on where they need to be. So I spend a lot of education, sharing of information. We have free complimentary seminars, and we do a lot of really neat stuff. So we definitely have the opportunity to learn and grow. And man, can't believe it's been an hour already. So we certainly invite you guys to come back. We invite you guys to come back on Tuesday at 9 a.m. where we stream live. And if you miss it, then you can always pick us up on the replay. So thanks for being here again, my friend. I mean, this is fun stuff. I enjoy doing this with you.
I do too. It's great fun. Nobody else wants to talk about this stuff with me, so it's all good.
Yeah, nobody wants to play in our sandbox, but we certainly hope that
That's right.
we hope that this has been helpful for you guys. You're welcome to go ahead and leave your comments and questions in the chat. We'll be happy to answer them. And then, as this thing grows, then maybe, I'm looking forward to seeing interactive dialogue while we're actually doing this. So this would be great. Then that way we don't have to constantly be coming up with content. We can actually help people answer their questions.
Although we will never run out of content, ever.
No, we will not. We will not. So, well, listen, you guys have a really, really great rest of your day. And